Kristin, great to see you. Thank you for making a bit of time to come and have a chat with us. I want to start by asking you about the industry that you're in. Last time we were talking, you were saying to me the seafood, the fishing industry is replete with waste, and you're trying to do something about it. I mean, what's the story there?
Yeah, look, great to see you, Paul, and thanks for the chat. It's a great question. The when you look at seafood as a whole, the incredible fact here is that 50% of what comes out of the water is actually waste.
Right.
It's skins, it's scales, it's bones, it's shells, and things like this. And in a world where food security is becoming a bigger problem. I think that's sort of what we're trying to challenge, actually. That's our impetus for change, is to look at how you can valorize, how you create, 100% utilization of the whole animal to create meaningful pockets of value across the value chain. And that's not an overstatement. I think your question is absolutely right. And there's many other examples and analogs that you can look at that have done that very successfully. And there's other analogs where you can look at where maybe they haven't done it successfully and some good learnings. And so we are, threading the needle on that to make an impact, to make a difference.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly think it's a good thing. If you're gonna eat animals, then you should eat all of them. We don't want to waste their value. I totally get that. Let me ask you then about what you're trying to achieve. So the seafood fishing industry incredibly wasteful. You want to do something about that. What is it you want to achieve in the longer term? I mean, talk to us about the kind of impact, the mission that where you're trying to get to with this.
So I'm obsessed with tackling food security and primarily food waste. That food waste is a $1 trillion problem.
Wow,
You
I
know,
didn't realize it was that huge. That's
one
extraordinary.
there's enough food produced in the world to actually feed the planet very
Right.
well.
Okay.
Okay. 24% of all calories produced are wasted.
That's
One third, one third of all the food produced is wasted. That's 1.3 billion tons of food is wasted every year, or it does not get into someone's stomach. For whatever reason, there's things that happen at the farm, and let's say pests and disease. There's loss all through the chain. There's things that don't get sold in time. There's people who buy stuff that have a whole fridge full of things, and it goes off, and they end up throwing it out.
right.
It happens across the chain. It's not like waste happens perfect. It's all good, and then at the end there's waste. No, waste happens all the way through. But
Right.
that's an incredible number. 1.3 billion tons of food every year is wasted. One third of what's produced. It's a $1 trillion problem. It's
I
a
mean,
it's a big
it is
problem.
extraordinary when you say it that way. Actually. Just give us some. I mean, how are you going to? I mean, how are you going to fix that problem? That's a decent sized problem to go at. I mean, how are you going to fix it? Just give us your basic, the proposition here that you're trying to work on.
Well, we so I guess the best way to answer that is to talk about the impact we're trying to create against that problem.
Yeah.
And we remain solution agnostic. And we have to remain solution agnostic. There's many different ways to skin the cat.
Yeah.
But essentially we use some innovative biotech to take what is waste from the seafood industry and to create some wealth out of that. It's a transformation from waste to wealth. And we do that by tackling different levers of food waste. There's a lever around extending short shelf life product. 50% of what gets thrown out of a supermarket is because it doesn't get sold in time. It's the shelf life is too short,
Okay. So
right?
your technology helps to extend that. Is that?
So
Yeah.
we have technology that extends the shelf life of fresh and chilled food. We have a technology that delivers very good regenerative agriculture with biopesticides, biofertilizers, let's say agricultural inputs that deliver significant boosts in crop yield.
Right.
Like 20% on tropical fruits and things like this. And that makes a meaningful difference to the economics of farming. And then we have, a technology platform, which is more around protein replacements, peptides, hydrolysates, these types of things, which takes the pressure off sort of natural protein stocks, and allows replacement at positive unit economics. And I guess what we do though is one thing to say, well, this is these are the different platforms, but fundamentally, this is about making sure that it makes financial sense
Yeah.
and it makes an impact, right? An impact on food waste. It makes an impact on greenhouse gas. It makes an impact on water, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But no one, no one is sitting there making decisions saying, I am going to make this decision purely to save the greenhouse gases. No one's making those
Doesn't work
decisions.
that way, does it?
No. So creating something all around impact and having let's say, a lofty dream around food security and saving food waste, that's it's nice. I think everyone says, yes, that's a very nice thing to go and
It's not
chase
a bit
down.
of apple pie, isn't it, really?
Yeah, but if it doesn't make unit economic sense, then
Yeah.
nothing happens, right? And unfortunately, the impact that we would want also doesn't happen. So, we've designed the technology to make it very attractive from a unit economic standpoint. And certainly when you look across a full value chain, it's about creating real value, financial value, real performance. And if you anchor the impact that we want to create in performance, in financial performance, the side dish that comes with that is there's an incredible array of fantastic planet impact, in greenhouse gas, water, and all the rest of it, and meals saved. We have a dream where we would be able to eliminate food waste and be able to feed the world, and that's a really important thing as you go towards 2050. 2 billion more people on the planet.
Yeah.
The food system, the way it's built right now, just cannot sustain that level of that amount of food. Just we
And
have
it's
to.
great. It's great to hear that there are people like you that have got some ideas about what to do about it. I mean, where did the idea come from? I mean, just take us back to the beginning. I mean, did it happen in a kind of a flash of inspiration, or did you think, actually, I'm beginning to realize there's a bit of a problem here. I'm going to try and do something. I mean, how did the idea come about?
Well, look, I guess the best ideas come from a lived problem.
Mm.
When you've literally lived the problem,
Mm.
when you've literally seen the problem happen, you have personal ownership in wanting to solve it, right? And I think that's an incredible start point for any business, by the way, not just this one. Um, but this is a problem that I have lived. In the past 12 years in my corporate career before I moved into this venture. I was fighting that all the time. I could see the waste. I could see the let's say the loss of value that was happening, and I could certainly see the impact. And it's interesting when you're in a let's say a corporate environment. There's many stakeholder agendas in
Mm.
there, yeah, and it's sort of for all the right reasons, by the way. There's different priorities that come from different stakeholders, and they've all got slightly different agenda. But that agenda is maybe not as clean and crisp when you say, okay, this is the specific thing that I'm going to go and chase down this problem. And so, yeah, I mean, I saw it in the world of aquaculture. We look at whether you're producing fish or you're producing shrimp or you're producing food of any kind.
Mm.
You're looking for how efficient is this? And one of the things that I came across early in my seafood career, I mean, that's almost a decade ago, was when you really look at the numbers. Actually, there's no better way to produce protein. Whether it's the feed efficiency or the land use or the water use, it's just an incredibly good way to produce protein. And that has to play a bigger and more meaningful role in feeding the planet as we move forward to 2050 and another 2 billion people. And with all the waste there, that doesn't always make the cheapest price. And when you walk into a supermarket, it's not always the cheapest option where people, feeling the cost of living. And
Yeah.
so anything you can do to create, let's say, better economics for consumer
It's
households.
also a tremendous business opportunity, I would have thought, isn't it? I mean, certainly when we talked about it, I came away thinking that's a great business opportunity.
Yeah.
Let me ask you about that moment, though. So you realised there was this huge problem with waste,
Mm.
and then you decide to set up a company to do some, or an organisation to do something about that. I
Yeah.
mean, tell us about how you then went about building that business. I mean, how, as the CEO, how did you approach that process?
Um, it's, it's a good question. First of all, you've got to surround yourself with experts,
Yeah,
right? You literally have to be the dumbest person in the room,
it's not hard for me.
right? Not hard for me either, right? Which is brilliant. Um, so I set about finding the best of the best and and surrounding myself with those people. Yeah. And then looking at collaborating and how do we work towards sort of moving towards creating an organization around that, which was a system of
Mhm.
engaging people around what I saw as the dream, ensuring there was a good alignment of values. Do the people who I'm surrounding myself always also believe in that dream and are passionate about that? And I think that's an important thing. You can't teach passion for something where passion doesn't exist. Someone's either, yeah, I get it and I love that, or I don't see it. And I don't I didn't spend a lot of time trying to convince people. If they didn't believe, then
Right.
that they didn't believe, right?
So the people you got on the bus are people that share your passion.
I think that was my first one. Are these people bringing some expertise where I don't have? And two, do they share that passion and that dream
Yeah. So
to
let
make a difference?
so
Yeah.
let me ask you about the next bit, which is okay. So you bring on board great people, very sensible, it seems to me. One of the challenges being a CEO is kind of working out what you do and what you don't do. And there's a
Yeah.
billion things you could do. I mean, when people say, strategy is mostly about what you don't do. I mean,
Yeah.
how do you kind of cut through the noise of all the stuff that's going on, of all the things that you could do? How do you say, I'm not going to do that and I'm going to do this? How do you work out where to devote your time and energy? I mean, how did you do that? Because you made a
Yeah.
lot of
So
progress with what you're trying to do, haven't you?
yeah. So good question. So look, I think a key part of the role of the CEO is to sort of create, or let's say, architect the energy and direction in the business.
Yeah.
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 And the direction's always about the clarity. Yeah. It's the clarity of why we exist, of who we are, of why we do what we do and where we're going and how we get there.
Yeah.
And and our North Star is always anchored in impact.
Right.
Yeah. It's about the impact we want to create. We don't talk about how big the business is going to be.
Right.
We don't want to talk about, um, apart from, let's say, the making sure that we're self-sufficient. We don't go and talk about the numbers so much. We talk about the impact. And we fundamentally believe, and we do that for a reason. We fundamentally believe that if you create the right impact for the right problem, the size will come.
Mm.
Yeah. And so cutting through what's important, what's not important, where to focus is fundamentally about, does this take us a step towards the impact that
Yeah.
we want to create,
Right.
right? And and we use that pretty ruthlessly,
Right.
um, in a world of opportunities, very easy, very easy for us to get sidetracked.
Yeah.
You know,
No,
that,
I think a lot
that
of entrepreneurs will say that. I mean,
you know,
one of the big challenges is not to be sidetracked by shiny, interesting, fun things that you could do that won't necessarily get you where you want to go to. So, I mean, I think
yeah.
you're not the
I
only one.
mean, I talk to um, friends and let's say people in the same sort of ecosystem, and people. It's interesting to hear, but some people are like chasing investment, for example, right? That's what they believe is important, and for them it probably is. I have a very probably a different point of view on that. I think self-sufficiency is very important. Um, Investment comes at some point, of course, but investment is for me is like a growth tool. It's not a
Means to an
it's
end.
not a life support system. If people are looking to investment or they need it that much, but that the business closes without it, then I question whether the
Yeah,
fundamental business model is sufficient. So we don't distract ourselves with that. We sort of know the impact we want to create and the type of way we want to operate, and we stick to that
yeah,
pretty rigorously, and we review it all the time. I mean,
sure.
yeah,
But
I'm sure what you found is that any plan, best laid plans, almost never fully materialize. I mean, I don't think in
yeah,
my
what's the
30
what's
year
the
or 30 plus year, I don't think I've ever had a plan 100% materialize.
yeah, I mean, what's it that Mike Tyson said? Everyone's got a plan till they get punched in the face, isn't it? I mean, you've got to deal with reality, haven't you?
You got to deal with what's
Yeah.
coming at you.
Let me ask you about that. I mean, building a global business, I mean, it's a tough gig. I talk to a lot of people about it. There are good days, there are bad days, and there's everything in between, but it's a tough gig ultimately.
Yeah.
I mean, what is it about this particular mission that you're on? To kind of cut out the waste, create a circular economy around the kind of seafood industry. I mean, what is it that motivates you to get out of bed every day to kind of keep plugging away at that agenda? I mean, what is it that gets you out of bed to do that?
Well, I guess it's a good question, and there's plenty of good days, there's plenty of bad days.
Yeah,
Um, so what do I get out of bed for? Is fundamentally it's for my kids.
right. So
You
it's
know,
about legacy.
fundamentally, I'm a dad. I look at the world and I think these kids are going to grow up in a world that, if these resources like food and water become more and more scarce, that's not going to be a great place. Yeah. And I want to leave the world in a better place for them, for my kids. And so that's what gets me the energy, right? I'm massively passionate about the what we're doing. So, I think I'm very lucky. I probably have the majority of my days are great, positive, great energy days. Of course, there's always some days where it's two steps forward, one step back, but it's never it's never sort of one step forward, two steps back, and that's also good, right? So even on the bad days, it feels like we're moving forward, and and I think that's always a good thing, and we have one of our values and one of the cultures that we build is celebrate the failures because every time we something doesn't work, that means we've learned one more thing, or we're one step closer to working out what does work, and so that's how we sort of frame the days that are one step forward, two steps back, or two steps forward, one step back. They're learning days, right? So there's still a positive energy to take out of those days as well. So we like to frame it as we're an organization that we certainly don't know everything. We're learning a lot, and that learning curve is
Yeah,
sometimes super steep, and that's fascinating. It's great. It's
yeah,
great to have a point of view and learn how little you know, because that makes you hungry and curious to to bridge that gap and
yeah,
to therefore deliver the impact.
yeah. I mean, you mentioned earlier on about surrounding yourself with a good team.
Mm.
I mean, and obviously getting the right people on the bus, to use that phrase, is a really important thing because if you get the wrong people on the bus, my experience is you get problems. But on the assumption that you've got the right people on the bus, then the next question then is how do you create a culture or an environment, a workplace, however it's constructed? How do you create an environment in which people can perform at their best? I mean, what's your take on, Getting the once you've got the people on the bus, how do you get them focused on the right things?
Um, I think the focus is getting them focused on the right things. I think is part of how we find the people in the first place.
Right.
So that's very key. And um, I think you like you just sort of referred to. I think being patient is also very key. There's a sometimes there's a want to we need to get someone in, and the cost of speed can be far greater than the cost of patience in my experience. And so that's part of the vetting process for us is making sure that they're at least aligned on the direction. Of course that changes, and we always sort of are in constant communication almost around
Mm.
if something has changed, then why has it changed, and all the rest of it. But fundamentally, I think my role as the CEO of the organization is really to create the conditions where success sort of becomes inevitable. And if you've got great people who are empowered to deliver great results, my job is to get the barriers out of the way,
Right.
uh, and give them a highway to run down as fast as they can, and then of course within the guidelines of governance and good business practice and all the rest of it. But essentially in simple terms, and that's sort of
Mm.
how we create a culture of ownership and action is get great people in, ensure alignment on and clarity on that direction piece, so that there's clarity about what we are and where we're going and how, and then clear the road so that they've
Get out
got
of the way.
they've got an autobahn to run down instead of the M4 on a Monday morning.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And let me ask you about, I mean, yours is quite a different business. I mean, you're focusing on the kind of circular economy component to the
Yeah.
seafood industry. I mean, what is it? I mean, and there are other people that are trying to do that. Well, and what is it about your business that gives it an edge? Because it's been very successful. What is it, would you say? What are your distinctive capabilities? What are the things that you do that give you that edge? Is it about the technology? Is it about the people? Is it about the
Well,
process?
it's a bit about
Is it
it's a bit about the combination of everything. It's an ecosystem. Here's what I've found. Trying to make a big change in the world is difficult.
Yeah.
It's hard, right? And one of the things I spend a lot of time with is who's my coalition of the willing, right? This is about an ecosystem play.
Mm.
Now, this is not about us alone trying to force change.
Right.
It's about finding a group of interested parties that all are looking for some element of that change
Mm.
and finding that win-win, right? Actually finding the solution where everyone wins. And typically what we find is that's a very interesting combination of, um, let's say, the financial delivery and the technology that brings that together. Yeah. And when you wrap that up into an ecosystem play where you've got interested parties across the value chain and they're all winning. They're winning in financial terms, they're winning in sustainability or ESG or impact, depending on whatever the language is. Um, but if everyone's winning, then you get great traction, you get great support, you get an ecosystem coming together. And typically what happens is you you get that impact at scale. It's not little bits here and there. You can actually start to glue together a real ecosystem of change.
Mm.
Um, and of course, that doesn't mean, in the bigger picture of that trillion, of course, it's still a relatively small part, but proving that concept out and understanding the scalability of that, that's really interesting because that then is like a Lego set, right? You add on the next piece of the ecosystem or the next piece of the ecosystem, and the scale starts to
And,
really
and,
go.
and let me ask you about that scale issue. I mean, it's a big industry, the one you're in, and you obviously want to make quite a significant impact on it. I mean, how long do you think it would take to impact, to shift the whole industry towards the sort of model you're talking about, where there is significantly less waste in that industry? I mean, how long do you think that journey is going to take?
Um, look, it's certainly not a flick the switch and all of
No.
a sudden the lights come on everywhere and all of a sudden the world's a better place. I mean, this is a long-term journey,
Yeah.
and like any journey or like any change, there's always going to be, let's say, the innovators, the leading edge, the people who go, yes, I see it, and give it a try. But the majority of any adoption curve is well behind
Yeah.
the first leaders and the first innovators,
And
and
is
that's
that
where
where you would
that's where the
position
scale will come. But
you'd position yourself up the front end with the innovators?
yeah, and we're engaging with our coalition of the willing, and what I spend my time on is finding the other parts of the value chain that are also in that leading edge, that innovators, and that's in any adoption curve is usually less than 5% of the population.
Yeah.
Um, in terms of numbers, the size of those can be a little bit bigger, but let's say the adoption is usually less than
And
5% of the
is
participants.
is there a sense that different parts of the world, different cultures, are perhaps more open to the sort of ideas you're developing? I mean, are there parts of the world that perhaps really aren't open?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's parts of the world that are quite happy with the status quo, and everyone's doing okay, and thanks very much, but that's a disruption to my business model, and and that's fine, by the way, Paul. This is not about needing everyone to jump on board
Mm.
in the first instance. Um, what we're finding, though, interestingly, is the world is becoming a little bit more unpredictable. And
I think that's probably an understatement.
yeah, that's
Actually,
for lots of different reasons.
sorry, I kind of interrupted, but yeah, I mean, carry on.
Yeah, and as that unpredictability comes through,
Mm.
this is no, now it's becoming a look. I need to start looking at alternative business models and alternative ways of doing things to shore up my base business.
Okay.
Yeah, and that has been quite an interesting shift. As things have become more unpredictable, say cultures that may not have been particularly interested, or parts of the world where maybe no, all of a sudden there's interest because
Well, give us
actually
an
there's
example.
financial interest.
Which bits of the world might that be? I mean, give us a couple of examples.
Across across, I mean, Asia for sure.
Mm.
Um, Typically those markets are somewhat more exposed to the US, and
Okay.
obviously with the tariff conversations, et cetera, that's put pressure on on business models, and so all of a sudden the impetus is like, oh, we need to find a way to maybe do something different. Um, Latin America also, for slightly different reasons, but also interested in things because of access to Europe
Mm.
to other Asian markets as well. You've got food security growing as quite a large national priority. If you look at the Middle East, where I'm based, 20 years ago, the conversation was very, very different around food security. Same thing in Asia.
Mm.
Um, and I haven't seen the data. I'm not sure, but there seems to have been an escalation in food security and national priorities in that type of area when after COVID. COVID
Yeah.
was an interesting time, right? I mean, it was a shock to global supply chains. Actually, borders shut, and some countries with very high need for imported food. That
It really exposed some issues, didn't it?
Yeah, I think that sort of raised the bar on certain things. So it's a whole collective
Mm.
of reasons, but they typically are in the macro space, and those are changes for the better, I believe. So where maybe interest wasn't there, or the status quo was okay. I
Yeah,
think those
yeah,
but those motivations are changing,
yeah,
and changing for the better, primarily for financial terms, or financial needs.
yeah. It's often the economics that
Yeah.
drive those changes, isn't it? Let me ask you about customers. I mean, I don't know much about the seafood industry, but from your perspective, I mean, what does a good customer look like?
Um, I mean, a good customer is someone who wants to make the difference as well. Um, we don't see it as we don't look at it as a transactional relationship. It's not like a buy sell customer relationship. This is
Right.
a what we look for are people who want to make a difference, and want to partner in that difference. And and so it sort of comes back to, when we talked about team, and how I look at team, the the customer partners that we deal with are sort of the extension of the team. That's part of the ecosystem, of course there's a line between, but I think it's, a good customer for us is someone who shares the values and looks to create that value,
Mm.
and value for profit, and value for planet.
Yeah. And in terms of, I mean, one of the things that's interesting about your world is that it's quite new to a lot of people. I'd come across it before, but I think a lot of people haven't. I mean, what's your I mean, how do you approach kind of communicating with people about it? And I'm not specifically talking about the specifics of sales, but convincing the wider population that circularity is important. I mean, do you have a take on that kind of communications thing? Because it strikes me that that's a pretty important component to moving the whole thing forward.
Yeah,
Is that
absolutely. I
fair?
think I mean, I think circularity is sort of, it's anchored in, let's say, ESG and
Yeah,
SDGs and things like this. And I think it's about making it very clear about what the problem is, and making it very clear that circularity is actually about profit.
yeah.
It's actually about profit that has a side serving of some pretty good impact, for the planet. And I think that shift is quite a meaningful shift in engagement. It's no longer than it's an interesting thing on the side for, some ESG metrics or a sustainability report. This is actually core to the fundamental balance sheet of the organizations that we deal that we
So
work
it's
with.
pretty important to them. Pretty
And
important
I
mission.
think that's pretty important to anyone,
Yeah,
right? I mean, that then becomes really interesting for any business, and there's lots of ways that we can impact things. This is not just about creating impact in the seafood industry. The stuff we're talking about is using the waste of the seafood industry to create impact across food,
yeah.
right? It's about extending the shelf life of chicken breasts in a supermarket. It's extending the shelf life of the steak. It's extending the shelf life of the bananas and the mangoes. These are like the, these are things everyone eats. So the impact we're looking for is not a seafood industry impact. This is about creating impact at scale on food systems,
Yeah.
and actually, if you look at waste within seafood, actually, it's a small portion of
Yeah, the
of
total.
of, of
Yeah,
total waste. Fruit and veg can be as high as 40% waste.
yeah,
And there's much more volume in fruit and veg than there is in
yeah,
seafood globally.
yeah,
Let me
no,
tell
sure. I love to see a bit of ambition. I mean, I think it's great, really, wanting to tackle the whole lot. I just think it might take you a little while.
you. It will. It
Let,
will. Without a doubt, it will.
yeah,
And what we're doing is we're biting off little bits at a time.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Let me ask you about the journey that you've been on. I mean, when you look back at that, if you were to go back to day one, is there anything you do differently this time round?
Yeah. Yeah. I spent probably the first, uh, probably 6 to 9 months. No, sorry, 3 to 6 months, around there, trying to build the Rolls Royce of, this is how it's going to work, and this is the model, and da 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 da. And in my head, I was trying to over intellectualize and bringing in the experts, trying to co-create and build the perfect system.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the perfect system doesn't exist, by the way.
Well, it
It
does
doesn't
in your
exist.
head. It's
Okay. Of course, I thought it
difficult
did
to
in my
turn it
head,
into
but that was
something
the
that
learning.
works.
One of the learnings was, it's
Yeah.
stupid. I spent too much time doing that. I also spent time, way too much time, trying to attract investors
Right.
uh, to fund it from the beginning. And those two things I would fundamentally do differently.
And what would you,
Fundamentally,
and how would you do them differently? I mean, just tell us about how you would deal with
so
this time.
essentially it's not about getting things perfect, it's about action. Go and start getting traction. Go and prove the customer wants it. Go and get interest. Go and get the MOUs done. Go and get the letters of intent. Yeah. That says, yes, you're solving a problem that
Yeah.
is worth solving,
Yeah.
right?
It's
Otherwise,
interesting
it's
you
just a
say
paper
that.
exercise.
It's hard to I think it's really hard to understate the value of going and doing things because you learn
Just get
such a
and
huge
do it,
amount. Yeah.
you know? And I've learned that sitting around with a bunch of really smart people trying to design a system, right, is just intellectual folly.
Mm.
You know, it's interesting. There's some really interesting points of view, but the real learning comes from when you do it, when you talk to a customer, when you actually go there, when you know, you'll hear the point of view, you'll hear why that doesn't work, or why this is going to work, or why you should focus here. There's there's so much learning in action,
Mm.
and I would spend much less time going from, let's say, vision to model and perfect model to then
Yeah.
investment and then movement. I'd say, yep, you've got to have a view of what you want to go and do. You've got to have the mission, the vision. That's got to be crystal clear. Yeah. So I'd spend just as much time there. And then I'd just move to action. And I'd move to action in a way that is um, self-sustaining from a cash perspective.
Mm.
Yeah. And so not only are you solving the problem, but you're solving it in a way that is self-sustaining to your business, right? That allows you the freedom to operate.
Mm.
You don't need then to go and get someone else in or an investor in who's looking after their own portfolio and the returns of their fund or whatever else. All of a sudden you start getting,
The,
your
ca-
impact,
the
your direction.
counter argument, the counter argument to that though is that with investment you can move faster. I mean, would you not agree with that? Or do you?
100%. So 100%. But investment for me is a growth lever, right? And absolutely, I'm not anti-investment, by the way. I'm anti-investment before you know what you're doing and before you have the
Right.
traction, right? Of course, when you've got customers and you've got things and you're generating profit off revenue, you've got paying customers, you're not giving away your product for free, you really have actually pressure tested your business model, then investment can come along and make a meaningful difference to the
Yeah.
the the
Yeah.
speed of acceleration.
It's the
But
timing, isn't it?
I think it's using investment as a growth lever as opposed to life support.
Yeah.
You're bringing investors in because, at the time I was thinking, wow, how am I going to get paid? And that's life support. And actually, I'm glad that I didn't go down that path.
And let me ask you, I mean, if learning by doing, for want of a better way of describing it, is the key to making progress. I mean, in what way would you say the business has evolved if you look back over those years? I mean, tell me about how the business has evolved from where you started to where you are now. I mean, has it changed a lot, by coming
Um,
into contact with reality? I mean, what's the
it's changed. Let's say that the North Stars of the business haven't changed,
right?
right? The North Star, our our sort of the things that our glue that holds us together is the same.
Hmm.
Yeah. Because that's, as I said, anchored in impact. It's not impact. It's not anchored in size or, we're going to be a unicorn in 5 years or some other vanity metric like that. It's anchored in this is the impact that we want to make. And that hasn't changed. Um, but as I said, at the beginning, one of the things we try to hold ourselves to quite strongly is to be solution agnostic. We might have a point of view on this technology with this application equals this sort of solution. Yeah. But actually, there's a plethora of other interesting ways to go and solve that. That can use the same technology, but with a slightly different application. So what we're finding is we are working on projects that we didn't even envision in the beginning.
Wow. Okay.
Didn't even envision,
What
but
sort of things? I mean,
super cool. They're
give us
super
an
cool.
example. Give us an example.
Um, so we had, let's say, an application around how we want to extend shelf life,
Mhm.
and it was sort of wrapped up in coated bioplastics and things like this, which is super cool and absolutely
Yeah.
do the job. But we're also finding that there's interesting applications for that, say in like the branding stickers on fruit. I mean, you've seen a banana or a mango, they've all got
Yeah.
the branding sticker on it now. And we didn't really that didn't cross that didn't cross our head actually.
Yeah, that's also
Um,
clever technology, isn't it? I've spoken to people doing that. It's clever.
right. And it's similar similar technology
Yeah.
with a completely different application that then opens up a whole different way of creating more impact than what we were doing and accelerating our impact. So, those types of things you could either sit there and say, no, no, we are a company that does the bioplastic and that's what we do, or are we a company that delivers impact and we remain somewhat solution agnostic? So that I think has been a really fascinating journey,
Yeah. And
because
has it,
you
and has it,
learn different ways of doing the same
yeah.
thing with interesting technology, and
And has
it's
it changed you as a CEO? Do you think you're different now as a result of those experiences? Has it changed the way you approach the job?
um, yeah, I mean, I think it's humbling.
Hmm.
It's humbling, because actually the more you learn, the more you the more you realize what you don't know or how much you don't know.
Hmm.
And that's a great thing. That's a great thing is because it keeps you hungry to learn, and it keeps you hungry to close the gaps that are there.
And being curious is fun, isn't it? I mean, being curious is fun. It's much more interesting than pretending that you know.
Being curious is one of those things that I screen for. When we
Yeah.
talk about the team, there's certainly a screening around are they passionate, but I find people are either curious or they're not, and it's very difficult to teach people to be curious.
Yeah, yeah. Let me ask you a couple of questions before we wind up. I mean, what would you say, looking back, what's the best piece of advice that you've ever had?
Well, that's a good question, big one. Um, in as it relates to startup and starting up
Well,
a,
I mean, as it relates to business, well, in fact, as it relates to you, really. I mean, obviously the podcast is about business, but I mean, just whatever piece of advice you feel has helped you the most.
um, for me, it's uh, it's it's don't build until you know what problem you're solving, and be
Yeah,
very, very passionate about the problem,
yeah.
right?
Focus on the right problem. Yeah,
Have the problem first.
yeah,
Start with the problem.
yeah,
Um, if you nail that, you're in a pretty good spot, right?
yeah, yeah,
Now, that took me 30 odd years to find the right problem, by the way. So,
yeah, yeah.
I'm not suggesting that the problem will sort of pop up in front of you and be there, but finding the problem and then solving for that problem
Mm.
is much more impactful, I believe, than building for building's sake. And
And more
then,
fulfilling, I guess, because it's
I've
something
I've
that matters to you.
I've now I've seen many things in my corporate career, and now that I'm doing these startups. There's lots of examples. The graveyard's pretty full of people who've got a wonderful idea and start building against it, but and then try and find they've got a wonderful solution, and then they try and find the problem.
Yeah.
And that is tends to be an incredible waste of energy, of resources, and of people's time and all the rest of it. So really, I mean, I think one of my key learnings is really start with the problem and be curious enough and be humble enough to be solution agnostic, because you might just learn something really, really cool.
Yeah. And one last question. So looking forward, I mean, what sort of opportunities excite you, and what sort of exciting stuff is on the horizon for you now?
Well, for me, it's there's the scale up of creating this impact. But I sort of call myself an impactpreneur. And so I really look at sort of let's say performance, financial performance of the planet and people. And this is obviously a big opportunity, and there's obviously a big scale opportunity around the planet and performance. But I think there's lots of other interesting things out there where to make an impact, and certainly one of the things that really interests me is you just see the decline in teenage mental health, and
Yeah.
what's that doing? It's a separate whole problem, but um, you look at statistics around youth self-harm and God forbid
Quite frightening,
suicide,
isn't it,
and
really?
anxiety and depression, and all of those metrics are not going in the right direction, are pretty much across the world. And um, that's another area of interesting impact that at some point that will be that might be interesting to go and tackle. But so the world of where to what problems there are, and how to solve them is it's a very big place, and and I'm still learning, but I've got more than enough on my plate with the planet and the financial performance piece that we've talked about here today. So that's going to
Yeah.
keep me pretty engaged for a while.
Yeah, no, I can believe it. And like I say, I mean, I love to see people that have, you've bitten off a decent sized problem there to work on. And I always like to see a bit of ambition. And I mean, to come back to your final point there about, there are plenty of problems for people to do something about, aren't there? I mean, we're not short of problems, are we?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's a very good point there. Kristin, thank you for coming on the podcast. Thank you for sharing that story and talking us through how you see what I think is a really interesting area, actually. And good luck going forward. I mean, like I said, I think you've bitten off a decent sized project there. So good luck. I mean, I hope it plays out well, and good luck going forward.
Paul, thanks very much for having me. It's always a pleasure to chat.
Likewise. See you soon.
Okay, see you soon. Thanks very much.
Bye bye.